the breakout star that you think either played last year or could be a rookie that you would want to come away your fantasy draft having? Who's that?
I'm feeling pretty good about Darnell Mooney, who, if you go back to last year, it's not as if he was off the fantasy radar. Huh. He was a top 20 wide receiver, but you go back to the second half of last year, and part of this is because the Bears did not have Allen Robinson in the lineup very much, but it was like every game, you just look at the game logs, and it's like 8 to 10 targets, well over 100 yards during games. Really talented guy who's worked extremely hard this offseason with Justin Fields. The two of them have trained together in Atlanta. There is a rapport there, and as has been discussed plenty this offseason, the Bears went more of the journeyman route for wide receivers that they added this year. They added a guy. There are examples like Byron Pringle from Kansas City, Bayless Jones, a third-round pick out of Tennessee, who I think is going to be a good player. But if the Bears had approached this offseason differently at wide receiver, I might feel differently. But Darnell Mooney seems to be he could be a guy that finishes the end of the year with maybe like a top 10 target share in the entire league, just based off who Chicago has or doesn't have available. Outside
of David Montgomery, are you allowed to draft a Bear in fantasy football? I'm just wondering if I guess you got to check everybody's buy rules. I guess Javonte Williams is the one that I keep hearing that people are just coveting, thinking that now Russ is there and he was terrific last year in his role whenever he got the ball, and Nathaniel Hackett coming in, that he's going to have some sort of Aaron Jones type year. What do you think?
I would love to see that one. And he's another good example of a guy that, based off of where he finished last year and where he started last year as well, is being drafted well ahead of that pace. He had 1 week last year where Melvin Gordon was not on the field as the starter. And in that 1 week, Javonte Williams finished with more fantasy points than any other running back in the league that week. So he had nearly 25 against the Chiefs. It was a Sunday night game where he was awesome. I think the concern, and I use concern very relatively, I would not say major concern. I think I actually was just doing a refresh this morning of my rankings, and he's right on the borderline of the top 10 for my running backs. It's just that Melvin Gordon was re-signed, and I think Melvin Gordon's still a really solid running back. He's had at least 6 rushing touchdowns in every year of his career, and I'll be curious because last year, this is almost like one of those, I don't know about too good to believe, but almost you have to double check it because it seems so unlikely. The two of them had, in terms of 50-50 workloads, the same number of rushing attempts, almost the same number of rushing yards. Gordon had the edge in rushing touchdowns. If that turns into a 70-30 split in favor of Javonte Williams, then I'll be too low on him. If it's more like 55-45 or 60-40, then maybe some of the expectation for Javonte Williams will look a little bit lofty going into the season.